Wahoo! Fuck. Alright. Okay. So, first video to react to. Oh, yeah. It's gonna be about God, so let's open up with that. First stream scuffed as fuck. So this one not gonna be that long though, like a 1 hour long stream. Quick 1 hour long stream. The fall of Adam and Eve. Alright.
But then God said,
Alright, so the premise of this section of the stream is basically the idea that in the Bible, there's a lot of things that are contradicting, either with descriptions of God and his actions, or with descriptions of events with scientific reasoning, essentially. So there is this video about Genesis, and then we can go through it and we'll see some of the contentions that I have with the Bible.
But then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea, and the birds in the sky,
I cannot
over the
send
livestock,
20 people.
and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind.
Okay, so this idea of egocentrism, the fact that humans are that egocentric to think that this whole entire universe and everything that exists within it was created for our sole purpose. I mean, the sole purpose of everything in creation is for us. Is pretty ridiculous if you ask me. And I think it's funny because a lot of the sins in the Bible are actually things that are recontextualized in a way that is glorified. So for example, you have pride. You're supposed to not be prideful. God is above everything. God is above everything and everyone. So you having pride is elevating yourself to a status that you shouldn't have because everyone is below God and God is so absolute that you should simply recognize that and see yourself as what you are, not above your fellow men. But when we think about how humanity views itself as this special kind of being that everything in the universe is made for, in the Bible, God created us in his image. He created he created Eden simply for the purpose of housing us and creating basically a paradise for us. We don't know why he would create us. We simply know that he created us and then everything that he does is essentially for us. He literally creates the earth. Who is going to inhabit the earth? Humans and the other animals and plants. But he literally made it like habitable for us because we're not going to be the only ones habiting earth, but we are going to be the ones that benefit from all of the animals in existence, and all of the animals in existence exist to benefit us. That is their purpose. So literally everything that God does is about us. What's more prideful than that? Thinking that the almighty creator of everything in the universe has set every single of his actions to be for us. Yeah, that's just a side note.
Kind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. The story of Adam and Eve and the creation of man is probably one of the most recognized biblical stories throughout all of Scripture. It is the first story that appears in the Bible in the book of Genesis, which details the beginnings of pretty much everything, from the beginning of sin and evil to the very first murder and death. It also features elements of the fall of mankind, the fallen state of the world, and outlines the need for a redeemer of some kind. In this video, we'll be focusing on the creation of Adam and Eve in particular.
There's this concept too. So since the first section of the Bible, God essentially can be said to have created this plan where an issue is going to be raised. Some kind of conflict in the story is going to happen. And then he's also going to give us the solution to the conflict. Why not avoid the conflict altogether? Now, I've heard many arguments for why God has to let this conflict happen, which is the tree harboring the fruit of evil, why he let that grow, why he would test humanity. Basically, the strongest one I've heard is that it's to give us choice. Like, you don't really have the choice to choose good if there isn't evil. Like, you can't really exercise your free will if you don't have full range of the options that should be available to you. But when you take into consideration determinism, you have no free will. So he created Adam and Eve. Adam had this certain brain chemistry, this certain biology that he was born inherently with, as well as these experiences that he was going to go through. For example, if Adam was alone and Eve was never there, he would never eat the fruit. Perhaps if some other creature, some other human was created instead of Eve, like let's say it was Lilith or something, or it was another woman created from his rib, perhaps he would have never eaten the apple. If God had created them in a different way, a different outcome would have arose. So basically, he essentially let this outcome happen, or even willed this outcome to happen, by putting together the deterministic factors that usually are outside of our control, like the experiences that you will have and your base biology, to lead to this event of them eating the fruit. So when you put it like that, it's kind of like, okay, so there's this conflict. He knew what was going to happen. You could even say that in a way he orchestrated it, and then he will give us the solution to it through Jesus Christ, through our redemption.
Humans as far as the Bible tells us. We'll also be looking at their roles within the Garden of Eden, how they were led astray by the serpent, the
let's get some charge.
punishments they each received, and ultimately how they were kicked out of paradise.
You look away for 5
their
seconds
betrayal
and then
of
you get
God.
raped. This is what happens in Clash Royale.
In the beginning of Genesis, we are told that there was nothing, and that God created the heavens and the earth. He established the night and day cycle upon the earth by creating light, and also creates the sky, the water, and the land upon it. Upon the land he creates vegetation.
Yeah, I was not listening when you looking.
Created the heavens and the earth. He established the night and day cycle. We are told that there was nothing of paradise for their betrayal of God. In the beginning of Genesis, we are told that there was nothing, and that God created the heavens and the earth. He established the night and day cycle upon the earth by creating light, and also creates the sky, the water, and the land upon it. Upon the land he creates vegetation and plants which can produce fruit, and also introduces the sun, the moon, and the stars. After this we see God create fish and creatures of the waters, before creating birds that fill the sky. God is so pleased with these creations that he decides to also create land animals that move across the terrain freely.
Okay, so in the narrative of God's existence and of the Bible being true, there are certain things at contention, like scientific fact and biblical narrative. So certain events and how they happened could not happen in the way that it is described in the Bible, because we know how it happened. So you can only take one. Like, you can't say that plants evolved naturally from a singular cellular organism to a multicellular organism, eventually to plants, and then say that God just wanted to create plants the way that he did. So you kind of have to pick one there. And then even within the Bible narrative, you get things like God seeing that it was good, so he created this. They did not always know that his creation was going to please him and warrant him creating more. And if he always knew that, then why are we talking about it in this sequence of God creates, gets happiness from it, creates more? When in reality, God creates, and before even all of it, before action, he already experienced everything. If he's omniscient, he knows everything. If he's above time and space, he's experienced everything. He's seen through everything throughout all time. So why is he reacting in that manner? These two things come back up again within Genesis. Alright, bro, what's going on? Okay, Chief, what's going on? At least we have zero viewers, so we can figure all this shit out.
These creations, but he decides to also create land animals that move across the terrain freely. Lastly, he creates mankind, where, as stated in Genesis 26 through 27, he makes mankind in his own image and likeness, with the intention that they will rule over the animals that he has bestowed.
He makes humankind in his image and likeness. Now, in certain interpretations of the Bible, this is fine, but most religious people I know don't actually think of a literal man in the sky that's embodied in a physical body that would resemble that of a human. They see him as way more than that, in the sense that you can't even glimpse his physical appearance in such a way. He's not something that you could see like that. So if he's not this physical man in the sky, then how could we be in his image? Because we are clearly these physical beings that are easily embodied by our bodies. Embodied by our bodies, obviously.
Upon earth. We are then given even more confirmation of this in Genesis 27 through 28, which indicates that God intended for the world and all its contents to be ours, and that animals and plants are for our consumption, saying, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth.
Okay, so here we get to the ego of man. So God creates everything with a single purpose in mind, for it to serve us. Why? Why are we so favored by God? And what warrants his favor? So this is just a natural inclination that you would have as a human to think, of course humans are things to be favored. You're a human. Whatever you value as a human, let's say it's intellect. That's why you eat animals but you don't eat humans. Of course you're going to value intellect because that's what your biggest distinction from other animals are. Does God care less about autistic kids than a kid who's not autistic simply because of its intelligence? No, there seems to be this determining factor that's above anything else that could be replicated by another animal. Even if an animal was smarter than us, I don't think that would wane God's favor for us. So yeah, that poses that question. It's not necessarily something that goes against the biblical narrative, though. It's simply that I think it's indicative of man's ego. So you would expect this if the Bible isn't real, as in it's not a real accounting of what happened, or if God isn't real and someone simply decided to write the Bible and put into it things that are representative of their biases, then yeah, you would see these things. You would see the ego of man portraying itself as the singular thing that the world revolves around, like as this thing that everything, yeah, revolves around. Like just like how in the past we thought that the whole solar system was revolving around us, in that same way, God created everything in existence simply for our benefit. It follows.
the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has a fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food, and to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. And it was so. It is chapter 2 of Genesis which sees the first introduction of Adam. We are told that neither shrub nor plant had sprouted, because not only had God yet to send rain upon the earth, but there was also no one to tend to the plants either, to ensure their proper growth. What's interesting here is that we get to see one of two of the first. He decides that man should have a helper that accompanies him, and we get a glimpse of how much God cares about man, and that he takes into consideration how he is feeling. He understands that Adam, with no one to talk to, would likely have been lonely, and so decides to bring all the animals to Adam to find a suitable companion. He also gives Adam the honour of naming each of the animals, but from amongst them there is no appropriate mate. So God puts Adam into a deep sleep, and whilst Adam is sleeping, he removes one of his.
So what are these games that God is playing here? God should know that no suitable match would be found within the other animals, or is he not omniscient? I had heard this theory, I'm not sure if it's something that is fully confirmed or proved, that the God of the Old Testament wasn't portrayed in the same way as he's seen today, as this omnipotent, omniscient God that is the God of every single one. He was the God of the Israelites, and every single, I guess, civilization around Israel also had their own gods, and he was the storm god. Within that, even though it is the Bible narrative is clearly him creating the whole world, you do kind of see him having like less of this great power that he has later on in what is believed to be the correct interpretation of the Bible.
Ribs, and then closes up the gap with flesh. From this rib, God created woman, and he brought her to Adam. In Genesis 2:23, we are told that Adam is pleased with
I'm probably just skip to the
the
apple at
craftiest
this
of
one.
God's creations. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, Did God really say, you must not eat from any tree in the garden? Another interesting point to make of Genesis here is that the serpent appears to single out Eve in his attempt to
Holy
corrupt
shit.
mankind. After Eve tells him that they may not eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil because they will die, the serpent scoffs, telling her, You will not certainly die, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. The serpent doesn't appear to address Adam here at all, and through this, some believe that it is Eve who facilitated the serpent's
Oh
plan,
wow, he clearly
for it was
didn't
she
know
who was
any-
convinced otherwise, and she who hands Adam the fruit from the tree. It is also she who reaches for the fruit, and she who takes the first bite. Genesis tells us, When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food, and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some, and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together.
Okay, so the serpent convinces them to eat the apple, an outcome that God should have already known. Yet he still put together this set of factors that would bring about this reaction. He could have created another set of factors, like if the snake was never there, this wouldn't have happened. If Eve was less gullible, it wouldn't have happened. And we know that people aren't born with traits inherently. People aren't born inherently evil or inherently good. They are shaped. So if Eve was created with this, let's say, set of inclinations that inclined her towards being this way, and then it was activated by a set of experiences that determined the way that she would act, then all of this is simply a way that she was bound to always act. So God, in a sense, orchestrated the first sin by putting together these factors in that way, because he's the one that puts them in that way. He's the one who controls fate. Then the second aspect of it was, if Adam and Eve are yet to obtain knowledge and are yet to understand good and evil, how responsible are they for committing evil? A dog can do evil because a dog does not have the cognitive ability to think and to understand the implications of things and to understand why something would be evil. Now, I mean, a kid could do something that may be seen as evil, even though they cannot comprehend it, but they have the capacity to understand it. So that's why you can reproach your kid and tell them you can do better. But an animal who doesn't have that ability cannot be reproached in that same sense. And even with a kid, we still look at them and say, you don't understand the world yet. If Adam and Eve did not understand the world yet, how can they be blamed for doing evil?
Together and made coverings for themselves. Notice how Adam doesn't resist either. There is no passage in Genesis where he tries to dissuade Eve, nor any writing where we see Adam advise against this course of action. Through this, Adam is just as bad as Eve, as he is quick to join her in doing the one thing that God had warned him against. We are also told here that in eating the fruit, Adam and Eve don't die, but as the serpent had told them, they gain some form of insight, in that their eyes are opened. However, their newfound wisdom, the wisdom that is the awareness of good and evil, comes at a price. As a result of eating the fruit, they both experience shame, and through this, find themselves hastily sewing fig leaves together to hide their private parts. It shows the depth of how shameful the two must have felt, but despite being described here as husband and wife, they still feel mightily guilty about being naked in front of each other. Another interesting thing to take note of is that the serpent knew Adam and Eve wouldn't die, as a result of eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge. Could it be that the serpent was bluffing, or did the serpent have some greater knowledge of God's plan? As stated earlier, many believe that the serpent was Lucifer, for Lucifer was once very close to God, close enough that he may have been privy to this particular bit of information. Others believe that God had orchestrated this whole thing, that he lied to Adam and Eve about the fruit being fatal, and that he made the serpent say the opposite, just to see if humans would be loyal to him. Or perhaps the serpent was just that much of a wicked the opposite, the whole thing, that he lied to Adam and Eve about information. Others believe that God had close enough that he may have been privy to this particular bit of information. Others believe that God had orchestrated this whole thing, that he lied to Adam and Eve about the fruit being fatal, and that he made the serpent say the opposite, just to see if humans would be loyal to him.
When it comes to things such as God wanting us to be loyal to him, these seems these seem to be afflictions of the human ego. As humans, there are certain things that we want. We want loyalty. As an omnipotent God, is that something that you seek to the extent that you will test someone's loyalty and punish them for their disloyalty? I guess this will come down to analyzing what loyalty is for us as humans and how it would be different for a being like a god. So, loyalty, I would say, for humanity is a tool. If you cannot trust the people around you, then you can't cooperate with them because the outcome may be worse than not having them as an ally at all. Outside of the practical use of loyalty, it's also emotional. There's an emotional basis to it. I want someone who's loyal to me. Even if I knew that there would be no negative, but there would be no negatives to having someone that would be disloyal to me. Let's say I knew for a fact that this person was disloyal to me, but throughout the course of my lifetime, they would never do anything detrimental for me to me. Regardless of the fact that they will never do anything detrimental to me, there's this emotional aspect of knowing that this person is not truly loyal to me. So if God lacks the practical use of loyalty, because in reality there is not really anything we can do for God that he can do for himself, then it clearly has to lie within the emotional aspect of it, which then it depends on how you view God. I think that the way we should approach God and the way that makes most sense is through this kind of Eastern philosophical approach to the transcendent, where you kind of transcend things like the negative emotions of humanity. So things like anger, things like sadness, those should not be things that affect you in that same sense. Like, I don't expect to be able to get the better of God, to be able to make him angry, because that's what it is. Like, rage baiting has become a more popular term, but in reality, that's what it's always been. You're letting people have a certain control over you when they are able to anger you. God, being a transcendent being, is not someone that I would expect to experience these emotions in the same way that we do. Yet, he clearly does.
Or perhaps the serpent was just that much of a wicked creature that it believed Adam and Eve would die from eating the fruit, but lied to them in the hopes of seeing them perish. It is also only when the serpent tells Adam and Eve that you will be like God, knowing good and evil, that they decide to eat from the tree. I'm reminded of an old quote that once said, "Everyone's got a price," and it seems like for Adam and Eve, their price was to be like God. Whilst one may have seen us in the flattering light, it also highlights man's ambition, that he wants to be the most powerful, that he wants to rule the world, that he wants to be the most high, something that may have been eerily reminiscent to God as one such as Lucifer, yet another being he had given his utmost trust to. If you think about it, it's almost no wonder God allows some of the calamities to happen to man throughout the Bible, given that everyone seems to end up betraying him in some way.
So again, God is this transcendent being who, in fact, already knows the future. He already knew humanity was going to betray him. Yet he still gets angry at them. He's this transcendental being who is still affected by these human emotions. So you kind of have to recontextualize the term transcendence and think about what God is afflicted by in terms of human emotions. So God feels anger, he can feel betrayed. So here are already a few human emotions that are kind of negative. That outside of their practical use, maybe you do need to be angry. Because if you didn't get angry, then people could constantly take advantage of you. In reality, anger still isn't necessarily the best device because you could not let people take advantage of you. Just think about it logically. Yet not let anger cloud your judgment because that's what anger does. So I would expect God to not have that emotion. But even if we grant the practical use of anger, God once again does not have the practical aspect of it. So it once again falls back to the emotion. It's a pure emotional response. So we are fine with God feeling such negative emotions such as anger. But when it comes to other things like lust, no one would say that God feels lust. Why? Because they feel a certain aversion to lust. They see lust and they view it as a complete worldly desire, something that would be beneath God. Yet they don't see anger, something that is also a worldly affliction, a byproduct of your human ego, as something that is also a negative that God wouldn't have. Wrath is a sin. Wrath is one of the seven deadly sins.
Soon after they eat from the tree, God comes looking for them and calls out to them, but the two try to hide amongst the trees of the garden. When God does find them, Adam tells him that they hid because he was scared of being found naked, to which God answers, "Who told you that you were naked?" Realizing that Adam is aware of his nakedness and his shame, he immediately comes to the conclusion that Adam has betrayed him and eaten from the tree of knowledge. Adam pretty much snitches on Eve straight away. He says, "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it."
Didn't hesitate to snitch.
Here it seems that Adam tries to shift the blame onto Eve, given that he doesn't actually accept responsibility for eating the fruit himself. At no point does Eve or the serpent appear to force Adam to eat it. In fact, he seems quite willing to share in the spoils of the tree if it will grant him the wisdom that the serpent promises. Here, Adam comes.
Okay, so here you have the last reoccurring themes that I addressed before. God being somehow ignorant of certain things, yet being omniscient according to his description in the Bible. You have God after this getting angry and casting the curses upon humanity, showing wrath, once again acting in a way that is not representative of someone who's omniscient who already knew what was going to happen. You might have heard of this show called JoJo's, and in part 6, I believe, there was this plane called the. I don't remember what the plan was called, but it was basically this plan about achieving heaven in a sense, where you would have everyone live in this state of not bliss, but the closest thing to it, where everybody would be resigned to their fate because they would understand their fate and know their fate. If you knew your future, then you would be less saddened by its occurrence. If I knew that I was going to fail my test, after the test is over, after it's graded and I pick up my test, I'm going to be less sad. If God has experienced all of time, shouldn't he already have experienced this in a sense? Or if he simply knows it? I think those are the same thing. If he knows it, it's almost the same as experiencing it in a sense. If I knew the future, it's almost like I could see the future. And if I can see the future, it's very similar to experiencing it myself. Yet, he still feels the same wrath that he would if he hadn't. Something else that doesn't make sense. And then there's the punishment itself. So God is fair. That is one of the descriptors of God. Yet within that fairness, he still will afflict humanity with these blights that will not only punish Adam and Eve, but all of humanity in general. And it's something that we usually accept even though it doesn't make much sense. If I were to punish a kid because his dad owed me money, we all know that that would not be fair. We know that's how the universe works. If your dad isn't rich and my dad is, you're gonna get punished for it by the world. I'm gonna get more things than you. I'm gonna be able to go to a good school while you might not be able to. But no one says that the world is fair. It simply is. Yet now you're telling me that there's this creator who had intent, yet intended for it to be unfair. But still, he will be described as fair. But that's my review on Genesis. I think a lot of it runs contrary to its nature. It's almost hard to believe that it was meant to be consistent, unless there's something I'm missing. I think it would be that. I think a large factor of it is the change in morality. I think a lot of people today would have very different opinions of how morality works than people in the past. I think people were a lot more rough, a lot more tough, a lot more evil than they are today. So perhaps a God that would orchestrate your downfall, know every single factor that leads to it, and still putting those factors in place would still be considered good at the time. But looking at it through the modern lenses, I can't help but feel that this is wrong. Even the conclusion of it is wrong. That the evil that we all experience is somewhat fair because everything that God does is fair, yet clearly is not because we are punished by no fault of our own. How can we bear a sin that isn't ours? How is that possible? But on that note, let's end the vid. See you in the next one. But on that note, this was the vid about Genesis and its contradictions. See you in the next one. Let's end the recording. I think. Stop recording. Start new recording. Okay, that was 30 minutes. That's not going to be that hard to edit. Since a lot of it is going to be removed as well. Okay, what's the next one? This 30 minutes? I think I can get some philosophy shorts on that. So the elk. Bro, what? Did I just start a new one? Okay. I think I should be able to get 3 shorts on that.
Chief.
But regardless, so I wanted to do one about philosophy, 2 about philosophy, 1 about another topic. Well, it's fine if I'm not interested in any other topics currently. Let's do some trolley problems, why not? kind of just interesting. All right. Okay, so this is going to be a reaction. There's a chat. So this will be me attempting a few trolley problems, reacting to the Alex video, reacting to the Alex O'Connor video, trolley problem memes, but taking them seriously. And I'm also going to take them seriously. I'm going to try to answer before he does, because obviously he is way more informed than me when it comes to it. But I also want to share my own opinion. So I'll give my answer and then we'll get his answer and then maybe a re-evaluation from me. Of course it's muted.
The trolley problem is more than just a philosophical thought experiment coined by Judith Jarvis Thomson in 1976. It is undeniably, at this point, something of a cultural icon. It is to ethics what Schrodinger's cat is to quantum mechanics. It is, in other words, a little bit of a meme. And in fact, there's a fairly popular Facebook page called Trolley Problem Memes, which catalogues some of the more entertaining and absurd varieties of this famous ethical dilemma. So I thought that I would take a moment to go through some of them and give them, frankly, far more care and philosophical attention than they deserve. Of course, if you're unfamiliar with the original trolley problem, it's rather simple. There is a train hurtling down a track that's about to run over 5 people who are tied up to the track. You have a lever that you can pull, and by doing so, divert the train onto another track where only one person is tied up. Do you pull the lever in order to save the 5 and kill the 1? So the first famous variant on the trolley problem is that of a fat man on a bridge. Instead of there being 2 tracks, a train is now just hurtling towards 5 people, and you're stood on a bridge with a rather large man who you can push off the bridge.
Okay, 5 is a little bit too easy. I'll do it for 2. 5 is a bit too easy if you ask me. I still get the people who wouldn't do it because it makes sense in a certain way that in one of them you're not involved at all. So it's not your sin to bear, it's not your fault. While if you do push them off, although you save more people, you now have objectively killed someone. It is simply a fact now that you are involved, unlike the other ones. But I think the correct way to look at it is that you have to make a choice anyways. So you are involved regardless. So these people's lives are in jeopardy and there's something you can do about it, and you can choose to either help them or choose not to help them. The act of choosing not to help them is a moral bad. So regardless of what you do, you have acted in a certain way. You have made a choice. It can be a good choice or a bad choice, but a choice will be made.
And if you do so, he'll crash into the train, stopping the train in its tracks, but of course killing the fat man in the process. And the question is, would you push the fat man off the bridge in order to save the 5 people? Now, many people say that although they would pull the lever to divert the train, killing 1 person instead of 5, they wouldn't push the fat man off the bridge. But that's not particularly interesting, is it, really? Of course, the memes on this page are just memes, but one of the things that makes them so entertaining is that some of them are actually genuinely quite difficult to answer. So let's take a look. Okay, this is just like the original problem. There's a train going towards 5 people and a lever to divert it, and somebody pulls the lever, diverting it into the 1 person because they want to kill the person on the top. He doesn't actually care about saving the other people. And then there's another case. Someone lets the 5 people die because he thinks that pulling the lever is wrong. So the first guy will only kill 1 person because he pulled the lever, but he did it because he just wanted to be involved in killing somebody.
That's an interesting one. If the question is which one is more morally good, that's a very good one. Actually, it might not be that difficult. I think the person who killed the most people would still be the worst morally, because although their intentions are the opposite of the outcome that I gave, your actions are more important than your intentions to some extent. So if I stepped on you by accident, I think we would treat it very differently than if I stepped on you fully intending to step on you. But when it comes to, that's a good point. Because when we look at things like murder, if I murder someone on purpose, it's evil. But if I don't, at least I wouldn't think that it's evil. It's not even murder anymore. We call it manslaughter. So yeah, that is actually a good point. But I guess you could say that it depends on the intentions. Saving someone by accident is still a good thing. Saving someone while intending to kill them is still a good thing. Killing someone while intending good is less morally bad than fully intending to hurt them, but still morally bad. So I guess it would actually depend on whether or not the person is misguided. Like the person who simply doesn't want to get involved, therefore lets that many people die, is morally bad, in my opinion. But the person who only does it by accident isn't morally bad because they did not choose to do it. Okay, so yeah, so there's multiple factors. There is choice, there is intention, which can kind of be seen as the same but can also be seen as different, and then there's outcome. I think outcome is the biggest one because it's going to be the decider most of the time, but intention can also play a part depending on the situation, and then choice is also very important, which yeah, choice can be boiled down to intention as well, but it's almost like a subsection of intention because you can have choice and you can not have choice, and that's very important because I think some acts can be redeemable by intention. Like if Hitler had good intentions because he thought that he could save the human race or the Aryan race, he saw them as superior, and to him saving them was morally good, that does nothing. I don't think it makes him any better than if he was fully just like, I want to kill as many people as possible, and that's what I want to do. There is no greater purpose, I just want to do it. But if he didn't intend to, that'd be different. That would actually absolve him more. But the action is still going to be the decider because killing that many people will always be bad because of that action compared to the intentions, which can change it, but not as much as the action. But then it also depends on how strong the intention is because the intention being completely, so if you have the intention in the substrate, if the intention is the if the intention is within the subsection of not being a choice, then I think that you can actually get absolved for your crimes because if you don't have a choice, you can do a moral bad if you didn't choose whether to do a good or bad thing. If I hypnotize you to do something evil, you can be blamed for it. You can be seen as evil for it. So I think it's an equation with the factors of both intentions and actions. And certain actions have more weight, certain intentions have more weight. If you had no intention at all because you had no choice, I think that's the strongest of them all because that can basically negate any action because if you didn't choose to do it, you're not evil for the outcome. And then after that, you have action, which depending on the action, it can be absolved by other intentions than simply not having a choice. Like if I kill one person to save two, the intention there actually does outweigh the action of like the evil act of murder that it would have been if my intentions were different. But here it is, but here it's not actually a problem of intention. It's a problem of result. The results are more people are alive thanks to it. So it's not actually an intention thing. So when do intentions matter outside of accidents? It's kind of this is where I'm being led to. And I think every time, the only times that intentions matter is when you are not fully able to make a choice. And then it's a range of that. So if you're hypnotized, you're fully absolved. You had no ability to make the choice. If you didn't know some factors of the equation, like, let me think of an example. If I played a prank on you and I gave you a food that you're allergic to, and I thought that you were probably just gonna end up at the hospital, and then you end up dying, and I'm just that dumb that I didn't think to research, or to be like I didn't think of asking you any questions of how your allergic reaction works, and I simply did it. That's an evil act. It's definitely less evil than if I fully intended to kill you and I understood everything. That being said, actually, going back to the basis, to the axiom, kind of recontextualizes this question because the base of the axiom is human suffering. An increase in human suffering is bad, a reduction in human suffering is good. So your intentions are actually fully irrelevant. So actually, the person who kills the one person is morally better than the person who kills the five or lets the five die regardless because there is less human suffering because of the person that only kills one. Wow, so I guess intentions are actually fully irrelevant. It's just a natural human inclination to give grace to people who have better intentions than people who have purely evil ones. But you could just recontextualize your axiom because it is an axiom.
The second person doesn't touch the lever at all, ends up allowing 5 people to die, but does so because they think that's the ethical thing to do. And the question is which situation is more morally good? So many people think in the original trolley problem that it's okay, or maybe even the right thing to do, to not pull the lever. That is, to allow the train to run over 5 people instead of 1. And one reason for this is because by pulling the lever, you're involving yourself in the situation. If you stumble across something about to happen and you allow it to occur, it might be bad or unfortunate, but it can be said that you're not really to blame for that situation. But as soon as you inject yourself into the situation and start directing its results, then you can be held at least partly responsible for some of
That definitely holds some truth because I'm thinking of like, let's say I'm in an alley and I see someone getting attacked in the alley. I very much see myself not getting involved because of how dangerous it is. I don't know if the person that's attacking has a weapon. I don't know why the person being attacked is being attacked. I don't know why I'm victim blaming, trying to justify my actions of not getting involved. But I can definitely see me not getting involved. And I don't see that as much as a moral bad as me beating the person up myself. Which is basically what I'm doing which is basically what I'm saying when I say that you letting the people getting ran over is the same as you killing them. I'm saying that the perpetrator and the person allowing the action to happen are essentially one and the same when I don't apply that to real life.
the outcome. So now let's come back to the meme. Okay, in the second instance, the person does what we've just discussed, which is says, I'm not going to get involved in this scenario because I don't want to be responsible for anybody's death. So they allow 5 people to die, but they do it because they think that's the moral thing to do. Is that more or less moral than pulling the lever and killing one person, saving the 5, but doing so because you want to be responsible for killing?
I don't really think the evil intention even increases the evil that much in this case because it's a question of human suffering. If the human suffering isn't increased, I really could care less what your intentions were. Like, I guess it would be creepy to know, like, this person is killing for the sake of it. But beyond that, It's the same outcome. But following the principles here, if we're going by the principles, then yeah, it's not bad either, because I only care about reducing human suffering.
Killing someone just for fun. What I think we might have here is a subtle critique of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism would tell us that whatever results in the least harm is the right course of action. So in the trolley problem, no matter what, as long as one person dies instead of 5, that's the correct thing to do. That's the right outcome to be aimed at. The problem here that needs to be unpacked is whether ethics is about mere outcome or whether it's about intention and what a person is trying to do by committing certain kinds of actions. I think we can fairly clearly say that if a person genuinely thinks that the right thing to do is not to get involved and allow the trolley to run over 5 people, it's possible they may have made an ethical mistake, but I don't think we can hold them responsible for it in the way that we can hold somebody responsible for intentionally wanting to kill a person. The person who kills the individual intentionally is a more evil person, a more corrupt person, a less virtuous person. And if you don't believe me, just ask yourself, who would you rather be friends with here? Would you rather be friends with the person who, sure, allowed 5 people to die, but did that because he really thought that was the moral thing to do? Or with the person who saved the 5, but not because he cared about the 5, because he just wanted to kill the one person out of a sense of sadistic thrill? And that's why I say that this kind of example can serve as a critique of utilitarianism, because it tells us that the right person or the wrong person doesn't always map on to the person who maximizes or doesn't maximize utility. Sometimes it can be to do with intention or the virtue that a person is espousing. Now, the actual meme asks, is his situation more morally good? That is the situation of the person who pulls the lever more morally good? And I think it would be fair to say that yes, in terms of the situation, this is a better outcome. But if the question were, is that person more moral? I think the question would be an obvious no.
Okay, I think I can agree with that. I think it makes the case for the philosopher who believes that, okay, yeah, I can see his point, and I can also agree that I do think that this might be a flaw of utilitarianism, where the bases kind of don't match up with my belief of how morality works. So that might mean that utilitarianism simply doesn't acknowledge or put together enough factors to be able to accurately depict my views on morality.